All systems are go.
Roger that, Control. We will go for console launch.
Roger that, VCS. Power supply is plugged in. Cartridge port is open.
VCS is now at full distribution and great sales anticipated ahead. Control, we have a problem. There's a dip in sales. In television and ColecoVision, catching up fast. We can't keep up with them. We're losing them. We're losing them!
The Atari VCS video game console, past its prime. Atarians, we can rebuild it. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first personal arcade machine. The 5200 will be that machine. Better than the VCS. Better graphics, faster processor, stronger arcade game library. Hi, it's David from the Atari 5200 podcast. While we were recording and editing episode 5, we found that it ran a bit too long, so we've decided to cut it up into 2 parts. So this episode here is going to cover feedback and the contest giveaway for the Atari 5200 game Tempest from Atari Age. We didn't want the winner to be waiting longer than necessary to find out that he actually won. So please enjoy this little episode. Episode 5 is just around the corner and will be out shortly. Thank you for your patience. And again, thanks to everybody for their feedback. We really appreciate it. This show is for you.
All right. Well, this one comes from Maurice Molyneux. I believe he's one of our listeners from Quebec. So anyways, Maurice writes, "Hi guys, former writer for Atari Mag's Analog Computing and ST Log." So this guy's a heavy hitter, as well as video games and computer entertainment here. Wow, this is somebody who actually did something from the past here. This is great. Okay, so anyways, Star Raiders was one of my favorite 5200 games. In fact, I prefer it to the 800 version for a few reasons. 1, the analog control makes Star Cruiser 7 feel more like a fighter and less than a lumbering jumbo jet. Couldn't agree more. 2, having the keypad on the controller means once you get good, you can thumb the keys while simultaneously maneuvering and firing, which is not easy to do with the control scheme on the 800. 3, the improvements on the sector scan allow you to tell what kind of enemies you're up against before you're in firing range. That's one of the things I've always loved about it. And also helps you not waste time chasing asteroids. The only advantage to the original 800 version is that it's faster to go into hyperwarp from the map, but the puny time that it saves is more than compensated for by the other 5200 advantages. Back in 1983, my brother and I got so good at Star Raiders that, no lie, hit Star Commander Class 1 some 80% of the time on the commander level mission. It got to the point that in order to compete, we started tracking how quickly we could finish the game. Man, this is right up my alley. You'd play until there was only one Xylon ship left, flip the chart up to see the clock, then count the final seconds before you nailed that last ship. My best time, 6.9 minutes. That is awesome. Here are my tactics. 1, overall strategy. Where possible, always go after the 2 Xylon formations, or the patrols, in your vicinity first, because they move the fastest. Once you clear them out, you're much less likely to ever end up with a starbase-surrounded situation. 2, don't hyperwarp at the 00 or the 50 marks on the clock. Watch the clock on the galactic chart, and then the Xylon formations move at half-minute intervals. So being in hyperspace at those intervals means you risk arriving in a sector to find it empty. So don't jump in those seconds, just near half-minute marks, especially when going after 2 ship formations. This is great information. 3, residual velocity on exiting hyperspace. This is one of my old tricks that I absolutely love. Upon arriving in a sector, immediately go to the sector scan and flip the stick around to see how far the enemies or starbase are from you. If they're far away, turn so you're heading right towards the nearest one and let your residual speed from hyperspace close the distance as you slow to a stop. If enemy ships are right on top of you, turn so they're behind you. Use the residual speed to get some distance, then roll them back in front and switch back to the forward view. This doesn't work so well on the 800 because you can't turn the ship anywhere this fast. 4. The trick shot. My main goal is to always smash the Xylons when they are specks in the distance. That way, you lower the risk of taking hits and damage, which costs time as you have to go to the star bases. Enemy ships become visible at range 130. If an enemy ship is approaching from beyond this range, line it up using the X and Y coordinates and watch the range. When the range hits 135, pop off a couple of torpedoes. The Xylon appears as a faint speck at range 130, so 130, and often you can push the stick and nudge the torpedo into him at over 120 or 120 increments away. Drives your friends crazy because you can destroy many suckers before they're even really visible. 5, engines off. I use the engines only in 2 situations. 1, to close on Xylons that didn't automatically head for me, and 2, to evade Xylons that got behind me. Otherwise, I get within range of them, and they usually turn to attack. I go to speed 0, stop, and just pick them off. And it goes on from there. 6, when shields destroyed, slam on hyperspace without even looking at the map and place the targeting reticle just off center of your crosshair. You'll end up in the next sector, hopefully free of any enemy ships, and you can safely plot a course to starbase from there. 7, aft view. Use only to evade a shot you know is coming from behind, and do it only while gunning the engines to 9 to get away. Get some distance, turn around, and nail the suckers as they catch up. 8, never use tracking mode. I always use tracking mode. But I'm used to it. I could flip-flop like that, no problem. He says it's just confusing, and it's pointless if you use the other tactics that he uses, which I would agree with. But I love tracking mode. Lock-ons. Forget it. You got to do it. For me, you got to do it, especially against a star base. Unless it's a cruiser you haven't shot at yet, since they don't fire at you until you shoot them, get a Xylon in your crosshairs, and it's just likely to shoot as you destroy it. To destroy those pesky shield base stars, I just try to get them right in front of my torpedo tube. At that range, I can just slam shots into them so fast that they blow up, and it's much easier to dodge their return fire. 8, shields on and off. Off any time you're not around enemy ships. As soon as I wipe the last enemy from a sector, it's shields off. Chart up, select the next target, hyperspace, sector scan, look for enemies described above, and pop shields on only when enemies are within danger range, which is under the 150 mark. 9, hyperspace power. Watch the power a hyperspace jump takes. If it gets too big, do 2 short jumps. Takes a few seconds longer, but the power you save is more important to a top score. 10, the swap trick. Finally, if you have one of those cruisers that runs away from you and is a pain to overtake, or if a sector is full of base stars, just hit hyperspace, no map, and jump right back into the same sector. The enemy ship types there appear to be chosen at random, and you essentially get a sector reset. 11, correcting for a missed hyper jump. If the reticle slips out of the crosshairs just as you enter hyperspace and you end up on the wrong sector, if you immediately hit 8 to hyperwarp again and position the reticle exactly on the opposite side of the center of the crosshair from where it was on the last jump, you'll land back in that target sector. And that's what Maurice has.
Sounds like he's
That was a good
the ultimate expert on that game. That's it.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I mean, some of the stuff it works for him. Especially with the tracking mode. I love the tracking mode. I can see where somebody hates it. And for me, I always like to keep on moving. So, yeah, I never stop the ship. I always keep it going. But everything else, I can see how it totally works.
Good contribution.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Big time. He should have been on the show, too.
Yeah, I should have.
Okay. Feedback number 2 was from the Game by Game Podcasts admin. Gentlemen, is the Atari 5200 podcast on Stitcher? If so, please send me the link so I can add it to the GameByGamePodcast.com. If not, here's a forwarded listener request seeking your show on Stitcher. And you know who this is? I think this is Chinto, who does the Jaguar podcast.
Oh, okay.
Because
I'll have to look into what it takes to put something on Stitcher then.
Okay. Thank you for your feedback. Much appreciated.
You got it. We'll look into it.
All right, we'll do feedback number 3 from Brandon. I'm excited that you now have a game-by-game podcast. I had one as a child in 1984 and played the hell out of Mario Brothers and Popeye. Those are 2 very good games. I can't argue with him on that. I didn't think much about the back controller as a child. I was just glad to have the system. I do remember having to use a butter knife to get the start to work, though. Sadly, they quickly discontinued the games not long after we played what we had, unless we were lucky to find the game and it's still in stock. Then in 1987, we got an NES, and it was then quickly forgotten. Yeah. It's like those little NES classics. Can't find them now. Oh, well. Looking back, I wish I had taken care of it and kept it, but you know how it is for a kid to move on. Anyway, thank you so much, and I hope you find the show on Stitcher soon.
Well, another Stitcher request.
Yeah, look at that.
Bob, you're going to have to worry. You're going to have to figure out Stitcher.
I'm going to have to figure that out. That's all there is to it.
Okay. So do you want me to do?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are. Stitcher is fairly popular with a few people. So I'm going to have to just look into it and see how that works. From Tim Duarte. Hi, David and Captain Bob. I wanted to write to you and tell you that I enjoyed your second episode of the Atari 5200 podcast. Yay! I am not an owner of 5200, but I do own an Atari 400 and an Atari 800 and have many of the games that were dumped from the 5200 cartridge and converted for play on the Atari 8-bit computers. Still a fan. And by the way, that works vice versa. I know that there's some coding that has to go on, but yeah, both of those flip-flop between the two. And as we all know, the 5200 is nothing but a 400. So anyways.
No. The 400, 800 are nothing but a 5200 with a keyboard attached.
Right.
That's actually very true.
Well, there you go.
But that's one of the things, too, that people just, it always gets me, that people think, that the 5200 was like such an afterthought when really the whole 8-bit line would not have existed if not for the 5200.
Yeah. It was one of those chicken or egg type things. But they were working on this, and it was like, well, let's go. They wanted to get into the. I mean, it was always intended to be a video game machine, but then it was like, oh, wait a second, we're not. We need to get into this home computer game, and it just so happened that it would work that way. So then,
right,
yeah,
it's actually the point of bringing Apple into an analogy, but like the iPad came out physically after the iPhone, but the technology and everything designed, the iPad was first, and they sidelined it to make the iPhone. It's the same principle here.
Yeah, that was Steve Jobs.
Was the original brainchild, correct?
Yeah, Steve Jobs said, "Hey, we need a phone first. The iPad can come later."
Exactly.
Which is what I'm reading this off of right now.
And remember, kids, if it wasn't for Atari, there wouldn't be an Apple.
That's right. Amen to that. All right, so I am a huge fan of Wizard of War. When I saw that you were reviewing this game, I just had to listen. In fact, I just contributed to a podcast about the Bally Astrocade called the Astrocast. The website is, and we can put this on the Facebook page, but it looks like it's ballyallyastrocast.libsyn.com/podcast. And again, we'll post this on the Facebook page so everybody can take part with it. I contributed a comparison of the Bally Astrocade version of The Incredible Wizard and the coin-operated version of Wizard of War. It was a lot of fun. I also made a PDF article on it. And you can read that at, and this is the website, you can read it at 2600connection.com. I hope you will give it a read. I look forward to hearing future episodes of your podcast. I hope you will review Kaboom, Megamania, and Keystone Capers, and Zenji soon. I love the Activision games and would like to know what the differences are among the 5200 and the Atari 8-bit cartridges. I imagine they have to share a lot of the same code. Thanks, Tim Duarte.
Don't worry, Tim. It's in the pipeline.
Yeah,
it is. And it was funny because Activision was kind of cheaped out when they ported from the 2600 to the 5200. There's a couple of differences, but they absolutely shared a lot of code. So we got feedback 5 from Philip the Hoovian. Hello. I just came across your podcast yesterday, and I have to say it is incredibly entertaining. I love the shows that specialize in reviewing one-game consoles, and after finding nothing Atari-related on YouTube, I'm glad I found this on iTunes. I've only heard about the more negative aspects of the 5200, and I'm glad that you can show me all the good points. Unfortunately, I can't afford to buy the console right now, but I will try to do so as quickly as possible and experience the glory that the 5200 brings. I have a question for you. What homebrew arcade port would you like to see most on the Atari 5200? I know what mine would be. I absolutely would like to use the Robotron controllers and have Crazy Climber.
I knew that.
That would be cool.
Steve, you got any? You got any favorites there?
Well, you're talking about Crazy Climber. On the NES, they have a version of that uses the left-hand controller in one hand and the right-hand controller in the other hand, and you're actually, climbing windows one hand at a time by pressing the up button on the NES controllers. That would be amazing if they could do something like that for the 5200 with using the coupler and the two controllers together. That'd be nice. Nice little idea.
I think the analog sticks might actually work out pretty well in that aspect.
Yeah, it would. I'd like to see that.
Bob, you got any homebrew arcade port you would like on the 5200?
Oh, you know what? It's kind of weird. One of the ones that I really like playing with my Atari Max is Blaster by Williams. I mentioned it on the previous 5200 podcast, but it's one of those weird games where it was actually developed for the home market before it was going to be developed for the arcade market, and they said no, it's got to come out arcade first and then home, but it never really made it. But it's called Blaster. It's a weird one, but I got to tell you, it is one of the most satisfying games you'll ever play, and. Yeah, but that, as far as homebrews are concerned, not yet. But I plan on really exploring them when I get down to Portland next month.
Well, for me, I know there was a homebrew version of Gauntlet. I don't know how good it was. It was available on cartridge for a short time, but I would love to see a 4-player Gauntlet fully optimized to take advantage of 4 simultaneous controller gameplay.
Nice. I would love it if somebody did a Kickstarter for that. that would be I think that would be the ultimate 5200 game right there. This one is from Feedback 6. We got Michael D'Angelo. He's one of the new co-hosts of the Atari 5200 Super Community Podcast. Welcome to the family here, and here's what Michael has to say. Hey guys. So I got my Atari 2600 for Christmas of '81. I was just about to turn 10. My birthday is the day after Christmas. Oh man, what a jip! You always get you can never get the big haul in. My brother and I flipped when we got the 2600. I remember when we got Asteroids and Space Invaders that Christmas. Could home video games get any better than that? Well, that question was answered almost a year later. In 1982, when I first started seeing advertisements for the Atari 5200 Super System. I remember reading about it first. It must have been Electronic Gaming Magazine. I remember how beautiful the console looked and how cool the joysticks were. These had to be the best controllers ever, right? What really blew me away was the screenshots of Pac-Man. It looked exactly like the arcade version. And then I remember seeing the commercial. You know, the one where he gets a call from his girlfriend Judy and he's able to pause the game? Pause.
That was awesome.
Pause. This feature was unheard of back then. The ability to pause and start games right from the controller was just mind-blowing. I'll tell you, that's one of the things I always liked. It was like when you started a game, you were committed. You were in. I wanted the 5200 so badly after seeing the ads. So what if it took up the entire coffee table? Everything was bigger in the 80s. It still does. Unfortunately, since I just received the 2600 for Christmas the year before, there was no way I would even ask my parents for the 5200. And quite honestly, we were still getting a lot of play out of our 2600. I kept drooling about the 5200, especially as more and more games were released that looked arcade perfect. One of my favorite arcade games was Vanguard. It was great on the 2600, but when I saw it on the 5200, I was just blown away. Fast forward to 1989. I'm just graduating high school, and at this point, I already owned an Atari 2600, a 7800, NES, Commodore 64, and would soon get an Amiga, which was a great machine. I still desired a 5200, but more for collecting purposes at this point. After graduation, a good friend of mine asked if I wanted to buy his brother's Atari 5200 collection. For $150, I got the 2-port 5200, trackball, Wico controllers, 2600 adapter, and roughly 40 5200 cards. That's a steal.
In 1989, that's a deal.
Wow. Even with all the other systems I now had, I really enjoyed playing the Atari 5200. When the original 5200 podcast came out, I decided to find my 5200 and hook it up. It took a little while to find, and unfortunately when I did find it, I had to replace the motherboard. But no, these things happen. Controllers also needed to be replaced, which I purchased from Best Electronics. Now my 5200 sits behind me in my home office. I love firing it up and playing along with your podcast. The trackball, although loud, still works as good as the day I got it. Thanks for doing this podcast. I always look forward to new episodes and playing along on one of the best consoles ever made in the 80s. As big as it is, it's still a thing of beauty. And this is from Mike D'Angelo.
I'm saying it really is. It's a sexy console. I mean, it's sleek. I mean, it's big, but it's just gorgeous to look at.
And just what I wanted to say, just by happenstance, Michael, along with the crew of the Atari 5200 Super Community Podcast, will be talking about Vanguard on their next episode.
Yep.
Great game.
So, feedback number 7 from Ryan Staples. He writes, I was 10 years old in 1982 when the Atari 5200 was released. I remember seeing a commercial for the new Atari, and I was blown away. The new system had a cool-looking controller with a numbered keypad, and you could actually pause the game. I was sold after seeing first commercial. The graphics at the time were very close to the arcade counterparts, and the other systems out there at the time couldn't pause. I hounded my mom for one that Christmas to no avail. You already have the Atari, be happy with that. Fast forward 34 years, and my wife surprised me with a 5200 for Christmas. The games I received were Pac-Man, Missile Command, and my favorite Star Raiders. I love my 2600, but the 5200 graphics are leaps and bounds ahead of the 2600. I can't believe I finally got this thing I wanted the most as a kid. I feel like I'm 10 years old every time I play. Thanks for listening, and happy 5200 playing to all. Ryan S. P.S. I've become a master at rebuilding this lovely controller.
Hey, good for him.
Excellent. Yeah, let's put them to the work. Building controllers, man. Let's do it. Come on, Ryan. Build us some controllers.
Yeah, I know, because you're slacking.
All right, so we got the contest submissions. We have contestant 1, Jason Leonard. The Atari 5200 was the superior console of the day because of its innovations in technology. Analog joysticks, pause feature, arcade-style trackball on a home console, arcade-perfect Berserk with voice, my favorite game. It was really the super system. And Popeye still wants to know, where's Wimpy, Nintendo? Where's Wimpy? We have thanks from Jason Leonard. And then we have contestant number 2, Andy Heinen. Why is the 5200 the superior console? Because it has to be when the box was bigger than I was. This was my first game system, and I loved it. Andy Heinen. We have contestant 3, Michael Blake. Guys, thanks for this podcast. Huge Atari 5200 fan here, and it's so nice to see the system get some love. Why was it the superior console? 1, first console to allow 4 players, although few games supported it. 2, I like the analog controller, and pairing it with Star Raiders was worth the price of admission. Better than the Atari 800 XL experience, which I also own. 3, if you didn't have the trackball, the analog controller worked much better with Missile Command and Centipede than any 8-way digital joystick, and that is very true. 4, I and my parents like the ability to store the controllers in the back of the console. A nice upgrade from the 2600, though the Intellivision also allowed this. Yeah, we don't mention that name here. I should have probably... We'll bleep that out, right?
We'll beep it out.
We'll bleep that out. Okay. 5. The Atari 2600 adapter was the first forte in backward compatibility and extended the library where there was some great Atari 2600 games still worth playing, which is later copied by the ColecoVision. Although I think the ColecoVision actually made theirs first, if I'm not mistaken. I could be.
Yeah, they did, but we'll beep that out too.
Yeah, just beep. Okay. 6. The trackball was awesome, and man, I can't agree more. The best game controller made up to this date and many years since, and I can't agree with that more. And I know both of you, actually all you guys will probably agree with me on that. 7. Pac-Man nicely atoned for the for the sin that was the Atari 2600 version. You know, I don't even know if it completely did, but it was really a good version.
Hey, you know what? I think the 2600 version was pretty good for the 2K that they gave it. Was it 2K?
4K.
4K. 4K.
Oh, it was 4K. That's right. That's right. Because Todd Fry said he needed 8K. He needed 8K to pull it off, and they gave him 4K, and he was like, all right, I'll make it work with 4K. Here we go.
The bigger thing that killed it was they had to have 2 players. If they only had 1 player, it would have been much better. But that's a whole other story for another episode. We can go on for hours.
Right, that's right.
Leave that to Ferg.
Yes.
Number 8. For the reasons you said in episode 3, having an auto switch box was very nice. It still is. And I agree with that as well.
Completely agree.
Yeah. People today don't get that. Going behind a huge television set or an armoire to get to a switch box. You don't know what to do with it today. Perhaps most importantly, the system just holds up. My kids play it, our friends ask to play it, and when they visit, I'm even asked to bring the system for birthday parties, etc. For the system to do this well 35 years after introduction, it must be doing something right. Thanks again, Mike, a devoted 5200 fan.
Excellent.
A great one.
I like that.
Yeah.
That is a great entry. Thank you.
It really was. And then we have contestant 4, John Sturgis. If I didn't butcher that name. Hello, guys. Thanks for running the contest. The 5200 was my second game system after the Intellivision. Beep. The 5200 was the coolest looking system when it came out. I got the system with Pole Position and Pac-Man. I was really excited to be able to play the game so close to the arcade cousins. Later, Centipede, Robotron, and Space Dungeon were favorites of mine. I also played a lot of real sports and baseball. The ability to bunt a home run on rare occasions caused a great amount of excitement among my friends when it broke the tie to win the game. Sure, the controller was not great, but what system had great controls back then? I think I sold the system to get an Amiga years later. I was fortunate to find a really nice 5200 and a great bunch of games a couple of months ago. The games still play, look, and sound great. It's fun to hunt down these old games now. My Space Dungeon came with a true controller holder. Now I need to get Robotron. It was fantastic using the 2 sticks. I really enjoy your podcast. Thanks, and keep it going. Keep on gaming. John Sturgis.
Excellent. Yeah, Robotron's a great little game. Contestant 5 is Steven Ramirez. Hi, guys. I already have a 5200 Tempest, so I don't need to enter the contest. However, the reason the 5200 was superior in its day was clearly due to its truly innovative controllers. What other controller allowed you to pause your game and answer a call from your girlfriend? And he gives the YouTube link to that commercial we've all been talking about. So, anyways, excellent work on the podcast. Keep them coming. Thanks, Steve. We've got contestant 6. And then after this one, we got one more. So contestant 6, we have Richard C. To me, there are 2 reasons why a console can be great. 1, it has that nostalgia factor for the folks that grew up with it. Or 2, it can stand the test of time. For me, it's number 2. I grew up with a 2600 as my first console, but I didn't own or even play a 5200 until a little over 2 years ago. I was in the market for a new console, and it just stood out to me as very interesting. Also, the 2600 is in my top 3 all time, so I thought I'd give it a shot. To me, it's the closest I feel that represents the early 80s arcade games. I bought my 5200 on eBay, complete in box, for a decent price with 1 controller and no games. I got the controller working with a simple with a simple cleaning and immediately bought Pac-Man and football to test it out. I was hooked. Since then, I've discovered some of my now favorite games. I bought, how do you pronounce it? Is it Kicks?
Quicks.
I thought it is, yeah. I bought Kicks and Kangaroo because they were cheap and immediately fell in love. Kicks is now one of my favorite games, and since then, I've bought 3 other versions of it. I found a great exclusive game in Space Dungeon and also a wonderful version of Pingo, which I have never played before. In addition, I can play Pole Position, Vanguard, and Galaxian for hours. It's quickly become one of my favorite consoles in my collection, which consists of over 25 if you count the handhelds. Glenn, you got competition.
Yeah, I see that. He's got to outbid me on that box console, too.
Oh, shame on him. Anyways, in regards to the controller, I have found that it works well with some games after the initial cleaning, and for the rest, I use a Wiko Command joystick. Good call. So to me, it stands the test of time as an amazing console that people shouldn't look over. It has plenty of timeless games that I know I'll enjoy for years to come, and it's definitely a highlight and gets regular use in my game room. I'm always looking for more games and excited when I get to show it to my friends. Thank you for your excellent podcast. Why, thank you. And keep up the good work. I bought Star Raiders based on that last episode, and I was not disappointed. Game on. And this is Richard from Sanford, Florida.
And contestant number 7 is Aaron Pokula. Thanks to contributors to the podcast, past and present, that have made it so great. Keep up the good work. Thank you for accepting my entry below. The Atari 5200 Super System offered features that no other second-gen video game console ever came close to delivering in its day. Super System users could start, pause, and reset the console from their controller, whereas Coleco and Intellivision users had to access their console in order to reset the games. The Super System's chief competitor, the ColecoVision, only had the pause feature on select games. Coleco and Intellivision users were chained to their respective consoles by curly, short telephone-like wire. Now, I just want to put here, and you don't know how much this hurts me to have to say, but apparently there were games in ColecoVision that there was a certain button on the number pad, and also on the Intellivision on the number pad where you could actually also pause the game. I don't know if it was for every game.
That is true. Yeah,
but apparently,
and you could also reset from the controller, but it depended on the game.
Okay, so
you had to program it into the game itself.
Okay, so that was very painful for me. So Intellivisionaries and ColecoVisions, stop interfering with our connection, stop interrupting our recordings, and leave us alone. Okay, so we continue. Coleco and Intellivision users were chained to their respective consoles by curly, short, telephone-like wire, which couldn't have been more unhip by 1982. Super System gamers did not have to leave the comfort of their chair to adjust anything before booting their consoles. ColecoVision and Intellivision users had to reach around the back of their television sets to switch between TV and console use. The Super System's innovative auto switch box eliminated this step. The Super System may have had only 69 release games, but the quality and exclusivity dictate superiority. Quarter-munching arcade games like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Berserk, Missile Command, Mario Brothers, Miss Pac-Man, Robotron, Wizard of War, and Vanguard all exclusively featured on the Super System and were never originally released on either rival console. The near-perfect arcade ports of Centipede, Joust, Frogger, Defender, Galaxian, Kicks, Dig Dug, Jungle Hunt, and Moon Patrol have excellent replay value, and it didn't hurt that they could be played with a real joystick as opposed to the stubby mushroom stick of the ColecoVision or the disc of the Intellivision. I gotta like this guy already.
I knew you were going to say that. He's going to your heartstrings.
That's
David.
it. The Super System brought the arcade home. Pitfall 2, the Adventurers Edition, was also an exclusive to the 5200. The version released on the ColecoVision mirrored the VCS edition. The game was never realized on Intellivision.
Released.
No, not Pitfall 2. Pitfall 1 was on the Intellivision, but not Pitfall 2. That's true. Okay. Space Dungeon, and originally only available on the Super System and Robotron, both playable with dual joysticks, and innovation also not present on their rival consoles. The introduction of the Super System's trackball allowed gamers to enjoy arcade hits like Centipede, Missile Command in the way they were originally intended to be played. The trackball eliminated the need for gamers to go to the arcade and spend rolls of quarters. Excellent titles like Miner, 2049er, and Kangaroo arguably made up the absence for Donkey Kong on the Super System. Brilliant programmers, including Alan Murphy, Steve Baker, and Kenneth Hyenga, pushed the system to its limits. Sorry, say again?
I would say Hyenga.
Hyenga?
But
Okay.
I don't know. I could be butchering too.
No worries. And Kenneth Hyenga pushed the system to its limits, much to the benefit of those of us that continue to enjoy the games they authored. Another metric in evaluating superiority is size. Its competitors dwarfed in size compared to the mighty, sturdy, built-to-last, bulking behemoth that is the 5200. In the era in which it was produced, the Atari 5200 Super System's many advantages made it far and away the greatest console of its time. The system retailed for $189 in 1982. That's $472 adjusted for inflation in 2017. And for all that it delivered, it was a bargain. From its beginning with Super Breakout to its final game release, Gremlins, the 5200 never wavered in quality standard and provided gamers limitless enjoyment that extends to the present day. Its competitors never stood a chance of measuring up. Aaron P. Dun 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 dun. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. That was an awesome submission. Okay, now guys, now we got to choose who wins.
You know what? I went through each and every one of them.
Yeah.
I read through all of them. Several times. Aaron's was the last one to come through on the email. I got to say, I'm going to go with Aaron.
Yep.
Yeah, let's make it unanimous.
Okay.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents in, too. I kind of like Steve's because mainly, he already has Tempest, and if he wins, he could give it to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Plus, his name's Steve. He's got to be a great guy. So.
Of course.
There you go.
Of course.
Yeah,
but
guys,
no,
I'm going to say
Aaron's is great.
I'm going to go with Aaron. I'm going to go with Aaron.
So is it, except for Steve, who wants Steve's copy, are we unanimous? Aaron has one.
I'm going with Aaron. Captain Bob goes with Aaron.
Okay. So we want to say first, thank you everybody for submitting all your submissions. They were awesome. Trust us, it was not easy to pick a winner. If we had copies for everybody, everybody would get a copy, but we don't.
That's what the Atari Max card is for.
That's right.
There you go.
And we ain't giving one of those away either. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know what? If and when I get my new SD card one, how about we give away my old one?
Woohoo!
I'll totally do that. I would be more than happy to do that.
All right, that will be.
It's a great device. And again, everyone who submitted and listened to the podcast, I want to thank you again just for taking time out of your day to listen to us ramble.
Absolutely, thank you.
And a ramble-filled episode it was.
Yes, it was.
Find us online. On Facebook, search for the Atari 5200 Podcast. On Atari Age Forum, search the Atari 5200 Podcast, new podcast. We are on Libsyn, the Atari 5200 Super Podcast.libsyn.com/RSS.
If you want to search my YouTube channel where you can also hear the audio from the 5200 podcast, you can search me on YouTube. Just search Glenn Planamento for Glenn's Retro Show.
And you can find me, Steve, at Wired Up Retro on YouTube. I have my own channel dedicated to mainly video games from yesteryear and the controllers that you play them with.
Special thanks, as always, to the Throwback Network. Visit throwbacknetwork.net to learn more. And the Retro Junkies Network. Find us at theretrojunkies.com.
Okay, guys, the show is over. It was awesome as usual. Thank you so much for everybody who contributed to the show and to the submissions. Aaron, you'll be soon receiving a special tracking number with your copy of Tempest and Custom Box coming your way.
Absolutely. Woo-hoo. In fact, Aaron, if you could write us to the you can either private message us through the Facebook page, or actually let's just make it nice and secure. Just go ahead and email us at the Atari 5200 podcast at gmail.com. We'll send us your address and we'll get that in the mail for you right away.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program are those of the hosts and persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of ColecoVision or Intellivision owners. The Atari 5200 podcast is not responsible if you should start liking the Atari 5200 console over its competition. At this time, the Atari 5200 podcast now concludes its podcast day and ceases recording. The Atari 5200 podcast is produced under the authority of Bob Benedetti and David Vucetic. Regular listening of this episode now continues on iTunes and other quality feeds.
Discover Atari. And discover how far you can go.
Kicks is is one of my favorite games, and since then I've hold on. Let me.
This live studio audience.
Yeah, the live studio audience is happening here. Okay. Hold on.
Now, was it just me, or was this a quick podcast?
No, you were missing for half of it.
Yeah, you're missing half of it. I like this. Hold on here. Let me page back up. Oh, here we go.
It's on page 582, section 45. I was sold at after seeing today. Oh, jeez. Hooked on Phonics worked for me. Okay, hold on.
All right, who wants to go first?
Okay, wait. I'm still scrolling. Hold on.
Okay.
I've just come to page. What is that? 500. Hold on a second here. Okay, here we are at page. Okay, page 21 looks like. Okay, 20. Okay.
There you go.
All right. So, Glenn, can you see? Are you on that page now too?
There's like so many pages. What number?
Page 20, I think. Bottom of page 20.
Okay, I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm just winging it.
Okay, last episode feedback.
Okay. Now, who wants to do this one next? Do I get to do this one, or?
If you want, you can, yeah, it's a pretty good one. Looks like Michael D'Angelo, one of the new co-hosts of the Atari 5200 Super Community Podcast. Wow.
Okay, so you might as well continue because you just said it.